Welcome back to our studios in Lahore. I'm Hamza Amjad, and let's begin the bulletin with US Special Representative Zalmay Khalilzad, who says Washington and the Taliban have made progress in their talks in Doha on all four parts of a peace agreement. Now, Khalilzad says headway has been made in negotiations on counter-terror assurances, intra-Afghan dialogue, troop withdrawal and a ceasefire. Now, Taliban spokesman Suhail Shaheen says they are pleased with the progress in the talks. Shaheen says there is no obstacle in the peace process, but the talks have been paused for 2 days for an intra-Afghan summit in Qatar. And let's head to Afghanistan. At least 14 people have been killed and 40 others wounded by mortar fire at a busy market in northern Afghanistan. 4 children are among the wounded. Now, the Afghan military says Taliban shells hit the market in the Khwaja Subsporsh district of Faryab province. The military says the Taliban were trying to hit an army checkpoint near the market. Earlier, 10 Taliban fighters and 9 security personnel were killed in a clash in western Herat province. The police said 15 more insurgents and 6 soldiers were wounded in the attack on security checkpoints in Karakh district. Now to Sri Lanka, where President Maithripala Sirisena says he will not allow the government to finalize the Status of Forces agreement. If the deal is finalized, it will give the US troops free access to the island's ports. Sirisena says he opposes the deal, which is currently under negotiations among the two countries to strengthen military ties. Now, the president says no decision will be taken against Sri Lanka's national interest as long as he is in office. He said some foreign forces want to make Sri Lanka one of their bases. Last year, Washington announced a $39 million grant to boost maritime security in Sri Lanka as China developed its hold on the country. And in 2017, Sri Lanka granted a 99-year lease of a strategic port to Beijing after failing to repay loans for the $1.4 billion project. Now, Sirisena is at loggerheads with pro-West Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. Now to Syria, where 14 civilians have been killed in coalition airstrikes in the northwestern province of Idlib. 7 children are among those killed. War monitors say the warplanes and helicopters attacked opposition camps in Mahambul village. Following 8 years of civil war, Idlib is the opposition's last major bastion. War monitors say more than 520 civilians have been killed since the coalition ramped up bombardments in the region in April. The White House has said it welcomes the power-sharing deal between the Sudanese military and opposition leaders. The U.S. State Department has called the arrangement an important step forward. Washington has expressed hope that the agreement between the Forces for Freedom and Change and Sudan's Military Council will lead to lasting peace. The U.S. also commended the African Union and Addis Ababa for their mediation efforts. Washington also called for an immediate resumption of internet access in Sudan and the establishment of a new legislature. Let's head to Azerbaijan, where 2 soldiers have been killed in an accidental blast at a military base. Now, the Azeri Defense Ministry says the explosion occurred when a soldier accidentally dropped a tank shell filler on the ground. Another serviceman has been severely injured. The ministry expressed condolences to the families of the deceased soldiers. Turkey says its second ship will begin drilling for oil and gas near the northeast coast of Cyprus next week. Energy Minister Fatih Dönmez says the ship, called Yavuz, will be exploring off the peninsula of Carpathia. The second drilling ship was launched by Ankara on June the 20th. Turkey already has a drilling vessel offshore Cyprus conducting natural gas operations. Meanwhile, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has called on forces loyal to Commander Khalifa Haftar to stop their assault on Libya's capital of Tripoli. Now, during a meeting with Libyan Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj, Erdogan reiterated his support for the UN-backed government. Erdogan said Ankara will support Tripoli in efforts to bring peace and stability in the war-torn country. The two leaders discussed bilateral relations as well as regional developments. Now, North Korea has expelled an Australian student on charges of spying. Earlier, Alex Sigley was detained for 10 days. The Australian student is an active social media user and regular contributor to international media organizations. North Korea's Central News Agency says Sigley had shared data and photos collected in Pyongyang. The news agency says Sigley has admitted to spying and asked for a pardon. Sigley said he is safe in Tokyo, while Australia's government has warned Sigley not to return to North Korea. Well, the US has called for an emergency meeting of a UN nuclear watchdog on July the 10th to discuss Iran's uranium enrichment issue. Iran says the move shows Washington's isolation on the issue as it violated the nuclear pact first. Russia says it was the US who withdrew from the deal and now requests the IAEA session to blame Iran. International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed that Iran has breached its limit of the 300-kilogram stockpile set under the 2015 nuclear deal. And this comes after President Hassan Rouhani said Tehran will exceed its stockpile level to whatever extent it wants. Now, for more on this, we are joined by Mr. Mohammad Marandi, who is an Iran expert based in Tehran. First of all, Mr. Marandi, welcome and thank you for joining us. So as we know that Western pressure on Iran is increasing, do you think that tension between Iran and the world powers would, further increase after Tehran and Iran's National Guards announced to seize British oil vessels if its tanker is not released? What's your take on that?
Well, the guards haven't said that. A senior government official has said that. We have to wait and see. I think the Iranians are waiting to see if the British are willing to behave reasonably and to release the ship because it is a violation of international law. The United Nations has not sanctioned Syria. And if the EU has sanctioned Syria, it has nothing to do with Iran. So therefore, they cannot confiscate oil that's going to that country, if it is indeed going to Syria. And there are reports that it isn't even crude oil. But one important point that I think your viewers should keep in mind is that the Europeans and the Americans are trying to prevent ordinary Syrians from having fuel. That is a violation of human rights. So Westerners, when they want to put pressure on countries, they refrain from allowing them to import food and medicine, like the Iran sanctions. In the case of Yemen, they helped the Saudis to create mass starvation. In Venezuela, they tried to wreck the economy and prevent imports and exports to push the people of Venezuela towards poverty and towards food insecurity in order to bring about regime change. And in countries like Libya, of course, they just simply destroy it altogether. So this is, I think, reveals a great deal about how Western countries deal with human rights and deal with countries that they have political problems with.
Right. Now, Mr. Marandi, of course, we know, stated earlier as well, that the US has called this emergency meeting of a UN nuclear watchdog on July the 10th. Now, will Iran, of course, participate in the meeting? And if it does, what will be the Iranian agenda?
Well, the Iranian position is that just as the IAEA has declared repeatedly, Iran has been abiding by the nuclear deal. The Iranian nuclear program is open for everyone to see. The intrusive inspections that exist in Iran are unprecedented in the world. And the nuclear watchdog has never found evidence to show that Iran's government has pursued anything but a peaceful program. And even as we speak, Iran is abiding by its commitments within the framework of the nuclear deal. And the irony, of course, is that the Americans, which have not only violated the deal, but now they've torn the deal, and they're bullying other countries, such as your own country, into refraining from trading with Iran illegally. The Americans are calling for this meeting to take place. So it's sort of like a thief calling for a judge to preside over a court hearing case.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed Marandi. That was Mr. Mohammed Marandi, of course, from Iran, who's an expert on the Iranian matters. Now, let's move on to the next story, which is in Gibraltar. Now, they have obtained a court order extending the detention of an Iranian supertanker by 14 days. It believes the tanker was violating EU sanctions by taking oil to Syria. The latest development comes after Iran's Revolutionary Guards said it is now Tehran's duty to seize British oil vessels if the tanker is not released. Commander Mohsen Rezai said Iran has never hesitated to respond to bullies. British forces detained the Iranian supertanker off Gibraltar. Tehran also summoned the British envoy to register protest over the seizure of said tanker. The move has escalated confrontation between Tehran and the West weeks after the United States called off airstrikes on Iran. Now, Israeli forces have wounded 41 Palestinians during weekly protests along the Gaza border. Palestine's health ministry says Israeli troops fired live ammunition and rubber bullets at the protesters. The wounded also include women and children. The demonstrations call for lifting Israel's blockade of the Gaza Strip. Officials say over 300 Palestinians have been killed since the start of weekly protests last year. Tunisia has banned the veil in public institutions following a recent spate of suicide bombings. Prime Minister Youssef Chahid issued a notification that bars women wearing full-face veils from entering government offices. The order comes after 3 suicide attacks in the capital of Tunis. Let's go now to the US, where President Donald Trump says he is weighing an executive order to add a controversial citizenship question to the 2020 census. Now, a Supreme Court ruling earlier blocked the Trump administration from adding the question to the census forms. The Justice Department says it will press its search for legal grounds to force the inclusion of the question. The question asks if respondent households have any non-citizens, and census data determines the distribution of federal funding and the number of congressional seats. Democrats fear that districts with high numbers of immigrants will lose representation if the question is invoked. Trump says the order is one option he is considering to force the question.
We're thinking about doing that. It's one of the ways. We have 4 or 5 ways we can do it. It's one of the ways that we're thinking about doing it very seriously. We're doing well in the census.
A 7.1 magnitude earthquake has hit Southern California, and this is the second one in the region in less than 2 days. More in this report.
Oh my God.
California has been hit by 2 major earthquakes in as many days. At 7.1 magnitude, the second earthquake hit 11 miles northeast of Ridgecrest. It was at least 8 times stronger than Thursday's 6.4 magnitude tremor.
Well, we were just in our hotel room waiting for dinner, and all of a sudden the room started sort of shaking, and we didn't. You don't really know what it is. You think what? It doesn't register straight away until everything's moving, and the chandelier was shaking, and the kids were saying it's an earthquake.
Multiple fires broke out due to gas leaks in residential areas. Some 2,000 people in the country are facing power outages, but the risk of fatalities seems to have been evaded.
There have been a number of injuries reported. Don't have a total number of injuries. I don't know of count on injuries or fatalities. We have not had any reports of fatalities yet, but we do know that there have been injuries. There's been a significant increased number of EMS calls to the 911 centers.
Seismologists say the quakes can continue.
We have had 2 magnitude 5 aftershocks to the 7.1. The probability of another 5 in the next week is extremely high, probably quite a few more magnitude 5s to come. The probability of a magnitude 6 in the next week is over 50%.
The tremor was also felt in Los Angeles at a distance of 150 miles from Ridgecrest.
Moving on to Greece, where a blaze has broken out on the Greek island of Evia. Villages have been evacuated as firefighters struggle against the fire. Police have arrested a man on suspicion of starting it. Wildfires are common in Greece, where temperatures rose over 40 degrees Celsius in the last few days. Last year, 101 people were killed in the country's deadliest fire. And staying in Greece, voting will be held for 300 seats in the Hellenic Parliament tomorrow. It will be the first national election in Greece since the voting age was lowered to 17 in 2016. Opinion polls suggest that the main opposition party, New Democracy, will be forming the next government with an outright majority. In January 2015, Syriza party leader Alexis Tsipras became Prime Minister of Greece on a bid to overturn the 5 years of harsh austerity. Opponents say Tsipras failed to fulfill his electoral promises. Now, the New Democracy leader Kyriakos Mitsotakis defeated Tsipras in the European elections in May. Now, China has abundant reserves of rare earth material, but has not benefited as much as it could from this resource. Now, the country's rare earth industry is seeking to attain high-quality development by modifying its strategy. More in this report.
China is the world's largest exporter of rare earth material. The country has 1/3 of the total global reserves. China's rare earth industry chains are now expanding their activities to maximize advantage on the resource. Shifting development strategy, the industry is focusing on product quality and technology research.
The group used to produce low-end products with few requirements on quality and environmental protection. But later, we started to improve quality, lower the cost, and invest more in technology research and innovation.
The rare earth minerals are specially used in military and space industries. Apart from the usual fields, China's rare earth industry aims to use them in more arenas.
While rare earth minerals are mainly used in military and other high-end industries, we have been working on extending its application to civilian products, like using it in PVC materials, iron and steel, and magnesium alloy. Their weight will be greatly reduced yet with the same strength.
China's rare earth industry chains are moving toward an intensive development model that focuses on quality and efficiency.
Now, as gang wars rage on in Central America, some former members are looking to leave behind the lives of crime and violence. Getting rid of the tattoos which boast of their criminal affiliations is the last step in their journey. More in this report.
The gangs of El Salvador have an estimated total of 70,000 members. 17,000 of them are incarcerated. These men are former MS-13 gangsters. Having served long sentences, they now wish to become law-abiding citizens, but their tattoos betray their criminal past.
I feel bad about having these tattoos because I'm no longer part of the gangs. It's a youthful mistake, and at that age, you don't have experience or knowledge, so it's easy to induce you to do bad things, deceived by other people. I repent that, and I want someone to help me to erase all my tattoos.
Many of these men also bear gang tattoos on their face. Tattoo removal procedures are expensive, so some of them blot out their gang signs with more ink.
My dream is to remove all these tattoos. All my abdomen is covered with them, my back and a lot more as well. I covered my forehead because here I had the letters of the gang.
These men are also risking their lives. Gangs take offense to having their tattoos covered, putting ex-members in their crosshairs. Conversely, not covering or removing tattoos puts them at risk of attack from rival gangs.
It is actually a renunciation, but I consider that a person who has an ex is in more danger than someone who no longer has any tattoos, in the sense that it is an offense to gangs.
Prison authorities have requested international aid organizations for laser tattoo removal equipment. Until then, these former gang members will carry a reminder of their lives of crime with them.
Well, contestants from 34 countries are flocking to the central French town of Le Dorat for the World Sheep Shearing Championships. More in this report.
Amid rolling races and bleating beasts, 5,000 sheep will be sheared during a 4-day competition to crown the world's best shearer. The World Championships are being contested by 300 shearers from around the sheep farming world. The participants say that, just like football, sheep shearing is a genuine sport. Contestants must remove the coat of a sheep in a single piece and are judged on the speed and quality of shearing. At the end of each round, judges check for marks, uncut fleeces and uneven shearing. Physiotherapist Rain Boson says sheep shearing is as physically demanding as any other professional sport.
It is a high-level sport when it comes to at least the strength of the arms, the legs and the back. You need to have excellent abdominal muscles.
But South African coach Isaac Koppler argues that the physique of shearers does not matter that much. He says it is all about practice and technique.
Shearing is one of the few sports that you get paid to practice. So we shear each day. The shearers shear each day for 8 hours, and that's the practice. I don't have to go.
The final event of the championship on Sunday will require contestants to shear 20 sheep in 12 to 16 minutes.
And in our world of firsts, the first floating dairy farm has made a splash in the Dutch city of Rotterdam. The offshore facility offers a unique and alternative agricultural solution. Take a look.
The 3-story circular farm structure is home to 32 cows. The animals are milked by robots and their manure is collected at the same time.
In the history we call that poldering, so we created new land. And this is also creating new land, but then completely floating. So we're creating new landscapes on the water.
The farm desalinates seawater and produces energy through solar panels.
And we also want to reduce transportation, because now food is being transported all over the world with planes and ships and trucks, and that creates a lot of pollution, and it also creates food losses.
The Netherlands is among the world's largest exporters of food by value, and the farm hopes to transfer traditional food production on land to rivers and the sea.
Top US indoor farms have been stacked with plants from floor to ceiling. This is boosting the production to a level where the harvest can be supplied to hundreds of grocery stores.
The first version of modern vertical farms sprouted about a decade ago. Plenty, Bowery, Aero Farms and 90 Acres Farms are the young companies competing in salad greens grown in farms that rely on artificial intelligence along with LED lights. The modern technology introduced automation and tracking of data to regulate light and water needed by plants. Availability of customized light and water makes for tastier plants compared to sun-grown leaves. They use 95% less water compared to conventional farms. These high-tech tools help in the growth of leaves with very little land and no pesticides.
Came up to visit the farm. Again, I saw the vertical walls and I was impressed, but it wasn't until the end of the tour that I was able to taste the produce that I was sold. So flavorful. I never would have guessed that it was grown with so much technology.
At Plenty's new farm, robots put seedlings in tall, vertically hung planters. The planters move along a wall of LED lights for 10 days and are then put through a harvesting machine that shaves off the leafy greens. The machines minimize labor needs, and Plenty says the speed of production also helps control pests.
We're competitive with organic today. And we're working very hard to continue to make more and more crops grocery store competitive. We have our own strains of crops such that we can make crops that have never been commercialized available to people, because we believe if people are going to eat healthier, fresh fruits and vegetables have to be able to compete with packaged food in flavor.
Agriculture technology investors believe sunless farms are more expensive and should be incorporated where pollution and urban sprawl limit the availability of premium fresh food.
And Mexico City is celebrating the 112th birthday of renowned artist Frida Kahlo with a colorful exhibition of paintings from around the world. The Colors of Frida display brings her work home for the very first time.
32 artists have gathered in Mexico City to exhibit art inspired by Frida Kahlo. She brought life to paintings with a charisma reflecting her chronic physical pain, as well as her insatiable appetite for life. 65 years after her death, Kahlo continues to fascinate art lovers with her introspective portraits.
Today, for the first time in history, Frida Kahlo is in the hearts of Mexicans, in the heart of capital, in the Zócalo, in an homage to her birth. 112 years of life that had a major impact on art internationally.
Kahlo is regarded as one of the greatest artists of all time, not only for her paintings, but also for her feminist spirit. The Colors of Frida exhibition includes a vibrantly colored floral display.
It's beautiful, it's spectacular, it's important for people to know about our culture, about our roots, all that we have in Mexico. It's sad that others come from around the world rather than Mexican nationals to value something that is ours.
Because Kahlo's paintings dwell on strong themes of pain and female disfigurement, none of them sold for more than $300 during her lifetime. But as is true of many greats, her portraits now regularly attract multi-million-dollar bids at the world's most prestigious auction houses and sales.
Welcome back, and let's begin the business segment with the US, where job growth has rebounded in June after several months marked by slower hiring. A US Labor Department report says more than 220,000 jobs were added last month. It says the unemployment rate edged up to 3.7% as labor force participation rose. Many analysts say the recovery has reduced the chances of a 0.5% interest rate cut at the end of the month. A quarter-point increase is now considered more likely. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has reiterated his call for the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates. He believes the step will boost the economy. President Trump has repeatedly railed against the central bank for hiking the interest rates. However, Federal Reserve officials have argued that last year's rate increase was a precaution against inflation. Trump also touted the country's low unemployment rate of 3.7%. Turkey has fired its central bank governor over deep policy differences. Murat Çetinkaya has been replaced by his deputy Murat Uysal. A presidential decree did not give any reason for the sacking, but market analysts speculate that Çetinkaya was pushed out due to his reluctance to cut interest rates. President Tayyip Erdogan has asked the central bank to lower the rates to revive Turkey's stuttering economy. It has shrunk sharply over the last 2 quarters because of a currency crisis and soaring inflation. Well, let's have a look at the weather around the world. Well, that was all from the News Bulletin at the moment, but don't go anywhere. I'll be back in just a few minutes with your news headlines at the top of the hour. And as always, thanks for watching.